on this edition for Sunday, September 7th. The president explains his decision to delay immigration reform. From Africa, the latest on the Islamic militant group Boko Haram and the missing schoolgirls. And in our signature segment from West Virginia, rethinking the school year.
They get so many breaks that they're always refreshed and ready to go back to school. So that was the wake-up call to me.
Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Hari Srinivasan.
It's early September, and after their long summer break, millions of children and teenagers are back in the classroom for the first time in several months. But that's not the case for some students. About 4% of schools across the nation are on a different calendar, one that has them in school year-round. Students in those schools get a much shorter summer vacation, but more breaks throughout the year. Does it help learning? NewsHour special correspondent Allison Stewart traveled recently to Charleston, West Virginia to take a closer look. Her report is part of the American Graduate Initiative.
Let's go home.
When Brian and Laura Cooper moved to Charleston from Beckley, West Virginia 2 years ago with their young sons, they were apprehensive about the local school in their new neighborhood. It was on a year-round calendar where kids start school just after July 4th.
It sounded to me like the kids were in school constantly, with maybe just 3-day weekends here and there.
I wanted to stay away from the school district that involved year-round.
Why did you want to stay away?
I thought the kids wouldn't like it. I thought that, me thinking back as a child, I thought, man, I would have hated to be in school all year round. I would have missed summer, hanging out with my friends, doing those activities.
But once the Coopers, who both work full-time, learned more about the calendar at Piedmont Elementary School, they quickly became converts. Here's how the schedule works. Instead of one extended summer break, the same 180 days of school are divided into 9-week quarters, which are each then followed by a 3-week break in fall, winter, and spring. There's also about a month off for summer. It's sometimes called a modified or balanced calendar. And here at Piedmont Elementary School in Charleston, West Virginia, year-round schooling has been the norm for almost 20 years.
Once we got a sense of what the schedule actually is, we just thought, man, that's great. We can go on vacation in September instead of in the middle of summer.
They never get that feeling of, oh, I'm so sick of being at school, because they get so many breaks that they're always refreshed and ready to go back to school. So that was the wake-up call to me, to see how different they felt about it.
Have a good day. Principal Beth Sturgill is a big believer. She says, in addition to preventing student and teacher burnout, less time is needed for reteaching at the beginning of the year. And for Piedmont, which is a diverse inner-city school with a high poverty rate, having shorter breaks throughout the year can provide more stability for at-risk students.
There's lots of families that sometimes we have concerns about and we like to check in with and make sure everything's going well. And just to have that consistent flow without having that long summer break helps them.
Practically, the calendar also gives the school flexibility to make up snow days during spring break before annual standardized testing, instead of waiting until the end of the year.
I need everybody facing me and listening.
But the biggest benefit to running on a year-round schedule, according to Principal Sturgill and other educators we spoke to, is the possibility of adding more time in school by bringing kids back during the first week of each 3-week break. It's called intercession.
What is intercession? What's its purpose?
So it's a variety of review and reteach for those kids that need it, a little extra boost, and it's also some enrichment activities just to give them some fun things to do.
The extra week is optional and paid for at Piedmont using federal money known as Title I funds, which are designated for schools with high populations of low-income students.
You're naked!
The Cooper's kids, 7-year-old Zine and 9-year-old Tayan, have always attended the intercessions, which are also weeks that their parents don't have to worry about childcare.
Finding childcare for them for a whole summer is a lot different than finding childcare for them 3 weeks at a time throughout the year.
It makes for a very expensive summer to have 3 entire months straight where you're paying for childcare.
Despite the benefits of the year-round calendar that parents and teachers cite, it's not clear that it has helped Piedmont's academic performance. In 2013, only 38.1% of children scored at or above mastery on reading, and only 38.9% scored at or above mastery at math, below the levels from a decade ago when the state first started using this standard to evaluate students.
What the research suggests about the actual positive effect is that if it's positive, it's not great overall.
Harris Cooper is a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Duke University. While research has documented how long summers can cause students to lose, on average, 1 month of instruction, he says shifting to a year-round calendar is not a definitive way to increase student performance. But where it has shown an impact, he says, is with lower-income students. And he also suggests that it could help children with learning disabilities and those for whom English is a second language. But Cooper cautions even programs like intercessions that can add extra days to the school year are not necessarily going to boost achievement.
We shouldn't ever lose sight of the fact that time in school is a black box. Working with the school calendar can influence a child's learning, but what's most important is how you fill the time that they're in school.
People are stuck on test scores.
Oh, they are. Yes, they are.
Until a balanced calendar can say, look, we make test scores better, you're going to have some resistance. What do you think?
I think that's a legitimate comment, but can we say that traditional calendar makes test scores better? I don't know. I don't know that that's the case either. So I think you need to look at the whole child and the impact that year-round education can have on the whole child, and not just does it make your test scores higher.
In West Virginia, there's only one other school using a year-round calendar, Mary C. Snow Westside Elementary School, across town from Piedmont. There, administrators are experimenting with 2-week intercessions and making the extra time mandatory. And around the state, year-round schools have recently become a topic of discussion. This fall, a new law went into effect that mandated 180 days of school, but granted local school districts more flexibility about how to set the calendar.
So that if a district wanted to adopt year-round schooling, it could, but not one did.
I think people are really saying out loud, show me how this is going to help my school system and the students in our school system.
Christine Campbell is the president of the American Federation of Teachers for West Virginia, a teachers union, and she's not sold on the idea. In addition to the new state law granting school districts more options on the calendar, she says schools in West Virginia are in the midst of other major reforms, implementing Common Core, new statewide testing, and a new teacher evaluation system.
I think that people are overwhelmed with all the other changes that they're just not ready to take on that much change or one more thing until we wrap our arms around all the other things that are happening in the state and the education system.
While Campbell acknowledges that districts should have the flexibility to try a year-round calendar if they want, she says there are logistical complications, such as lack of air conditioning in many schools, and scheduling issues for older students.
Sports is a huge thing when you talk about a balanced calendar, because if you have one county that is, in the system, they all play each other in their sporting events. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like when you go from this county to play this county and their calendar is completely different?
So for people who say sports will adjust, you have to think about it bigger than it's not just sports. It's the social aspect and the importance of sport.
That's part of a child's development is being involved in those things, and it's a big part of our culture. Let's be realistic here.
She is also concerned year-round school would mean service personnel and teachers would be unable to keep second jobs, a necessity for many in West Virginia, which ranks 47th in the country in teacher pay. But one of the biggest issues is that providing programs like intercession costs money. And despite federal funding for some lower-income schools, it's not always clear who would have to foot the bill.
Does the community have to provide those services? Is the state going to provide services for the intercessions? If we're going to talk about how to bridge that gap in student achievement, what does that look like?
For the Coopers, the lack of year-round options for older kids is a big concern. In Charleston, there's not a single middle or high school on a balanced calendar.
Is there going to be a period for you guys when one of your kids is in a traditional school and one is on this balanced calendar?
I dread it. I'm very curious to see how that's going to work out.
What are you concerned about?
Tan will have days that he has to go to school that Zine doesn't. Zine will have days off that Tan has to go to school. So I'm sure there'll be, animosity both ways of who gets to do what.
One of the concerns we heard from parents was that there's no middle school to go to.
Yes.
On this
correct.
calendar. There's no high school to go to.
Right.
on this calendar. What do you think about that?
Well, I would love to see, my personal opinion is I would love to see all of Kanawha County schools go to the year-round calendar.
All of them?
Yes, I think it would be very beneficial for students.
For Piedmont students Tan and Zine Cooper, their first break starts next week.
One thing of this year's intercession.
And while many schools are just getting underway, they already have 9 weeks of learning under their belts.
How did the idea of summer vacation really begin? Join us online as NewsHour debunks a long-standing myth. Visit newshour.pbs.org.